takes at lightning speed. Let us guide you through events and stories about global narratives and developments in geopolitics, diplomacy, foreign affairs, and world economy. Get factual and multi-angle perspectives on stories around the globe. Global Television brings you Diplomatic Perspective every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. with Ramsey Enoch Agbo. Diplomatic Perspective, the world in front of you.
Hello everyone and welcome to another beautiful time on Diplomatic Perspective this beautiful day. Yes, we will look at something very important today. My name is Ramsey Enoch Agbo. I want to take us to what is happening at the Middle East a little bit before we actually go into the discussion. The US-Israel war on Iran, do you think this could have some implications on West Africa? You know, before now we'll be talking about Nigeria as a country, the implications. Someone will tell you about the fuel and all of that, the blocking of the Hormuz and all of that. But then today we want to look at the implication of this war for West Africa's security. One of the problems, the challenge that is bedeviling the West African states right now is the issue of security. And we'll have someone joining us on this program as we discuss this issue. We're going to give a perspective to it. Dr. Ibimbure Seifa, she is the head of department of the International Relations and Diplomacy Department of, as a matter of fact, at Base University. She's going to be joining us on the program. Well, she's someone that has been on my program before, and every discussion we've had with her in the past is very educative and informational. And she's joining us via Zoom today as we look at the implication of the US-Israel war, all right, for West Africa's security. It's good to have you join us on the program, Ibimbure.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Let's look at the issue we have at hand. What do you think of the war going on at the Middle East right now? Some persons thought it was not going to be this long. But we've seen a lot of forth and back, a lot of retaliations and all of that happening. Were you thinking this war was going to last for this long before we go into talking about the implication for West Africa's security?
Well, probably before the conflicts in Russia and Ukraine, I never thought that the war was going to actually last this long. But from what we have seen, we have noticed that wars can be unpredictable. And we saw that when this conflict happened in Russia and Ukraine, we all thought it was going to be for a few days, and it has dragged on for close to 2 years plus. So when we had the conflicts in Iran, there was the expectation that it to be wrapped up real quickly and everyone can move on. But it has lasted long. But I think that's a very important lesson to learn when we think about the Middle East. Nothing really stays for a short term in the Middle East when you reflect on Iraq, when you reflect on Afghanistan as well. So these are critical issues. So it wasn't a war that we thought was going to last for a short time, but we are seeing the implications. Granted, there have been calls for a quick resolution to the conflict because of its lasting impact on global economies.
Now, let's come back to West Africa as it is right now. A lot of people have been saying so many things, the implication, some will tell you on Nigeria, but we want to look at the whole of West Africa. And we are particular, all right, about the security situation in West Africa. So what do you think are the implications for West Africa's security as far as this US-Israel war is concerned?
Okay, so when I reflect on the implication of the war in Iran on West Africa's security, There are three perspectives I would like to look at it from. First of all, I will start from the most prevailing perspective, which is the economic angle itself. I mean, that is the one aspect of it that everyone in the West African subcontinent are currently talking about in the public discourse platforms. So from the economic perspective, there are two angles we can look at. We can look at access to petroleum refined products, which is very, very crucial for economic activities within the region. In addition to that as well, yes, Nigeria, the largest oil producing country, one of the largest oil producing country happens to be domiciled in West Africa. We do have our refineries, but unfortunately, we have not been able to produce enough refined product that will meet the domestic needs, not just of Nigerians, but also for the continent as a whole. And so we find ourselves having to subsidize or add on to what we produce by importing finished products. The Strait of Hormuz is a very, very important geostrategic trading route or shipping route for refined petroleum product within, at least for the West African subcontinent as well. So what that means is that we are having limited access to affordable crude or refined products. Granted, our refineries has been able to meet to a certain degree some of the domestic and subcontinental needs, but it is not enough. And so because of this limited and high cost of petroleum products, we are seeing this reflected in high rates of inflation, in transportation costs, as well as small, medium enterprises, and the distress level is given to these businesses across the subcontinent. In addition to that as well, a very, very important aspect also has to do with energy security. Energy security is relevant. It's very relevant for economic activities within the subcontinent. If we don't have access to energy, affordable, secure energy, it makes it difficult for businesses to thrive. These are two critical aspects of economic security. Another very important aspect of security is also food security as well. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping route for refined petroleum products. It also carries fertilizers, which are very, very much crucial for food production or agricultural production. Don't forget that in the last 15 years or so, we have been dealing with violent extremism in the subcontinent, manifested mainly in rural communities, which serve as the backbone for agricultural activities within the subcontinent. And so the additional cost of having limited access to fertilizers or high cost of fertilizers has an impact on the production of both food crops and cash crops within the West African subcontinent. And that makes it very, very difficult for farmers to survive as well, and also makes it difficult for access to nutritional food, which is necessary for human capital development in the sub-region. Now, other aspect of security to also explore on is the regional security that we do not take, that we cannot ignore. And although when you reflect on regional security and the war on Iran, sometimes you want to think about East Africa or the Horn of Africa, where you have Djibouti and the different military bases of the different actors in this war currently residing in. We do not have that right here in West Africa. But what we do have is that in West Africa, we have over 25 active non-state armed groups, each of them with different objectives, and each of them willing to use violent extremism or terrorism as a means of promoting their objective. Now, a very, very important aspect of this conversation is that when we look at the history of Boko Haram, one of the deadliest extremist group in Nigeria, has been known to ally with other groups that might not necessarily have the same ideology with Boko Haram, as long as it's able to get access to the support or resources that it needs. We have seen that Boko Haram was willing to ally willing to swear fealty with the Taliban in Afghanistan, willing also to expand his terrorist activities under the banner of Al-Qaeda, and more recently has also sworn fealty to ISIS. And that is just one aspect of it, something that we cannot ignore, because Iran has been using a particular tactic. It has been attacking the interest of Western infrastructure in neighboring countries like Qatar and Kuwait. It has also been known to support and also fund groups like Hamas and Hezbollah as a means of attacking Israel. So what stops Iran from providing support to this group if they are willing to take on this support, if Iran is looking to attack Western interests within the West African subcontinent? And of course, in Nigeria, we once had this particular group called the Shiite Islamic Movement of Nigeria. And that in itself was once a deadly group that has been largely decapitated by the Nigerian government. in the early days of this conflict, when the Ayatollah was assassinated, we saw pockets of protests by these groups in different parts of northern Nigeria. But the Nigerian government was able to contain this particular movement. But what if this particular group or Iran was willing to profess support? So these are critical issues that we cannot ignore. But before I go on to the next approach for diplomatic implication, I think maybe you might have a question regarding that, because I don't want to go off.
Actually, I do have, because while you were talking about that, what came to my mind was arms proliferation into West Africa. We've had situations whereby wars like this, all right, conflict, a lot of people take advantage of conflict like this, like you were mentioning. What could you think, or what's your perspective to this conflict triggering arms proliferation into West Africa? What do you think about that?
Well, so far so good. We haven't been able to establish any direct links between the conflict, between the conflict in Iran and possible proliferation of arms in the region. But we do know that the AES states, which is Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, because of the loud or their strong advocacy regarding anti-imperialism, have had to look for alternative source of access to arms to continue waging war against violent extremism within their own country. And Iran has been quite instrumental in accessing of those arms. But at the same time, there are other actors who are willing to provide arms transfer for legitimate state actors within the subcontinent. We are talking about Russia. We are talking about Turkey as well, and the UAE. And the UAE. So we have that particular aspect. But on the unlikely events, that we have a case of Iran willing to support non-state armed actors, that is one of the avenues that we can explore. And on also the unlikely event, and I use the word unlikely with a lot of faith, that Iran decides to conduct a proxy war, let's say in the Horn of Africa or in North Africa, then we will definitely have that weapons proliferation trickling down to West Africa. But so far, so good. We have been unable to establish that clear link. It's not impossible, but it has not been established yet.
The war going on right now, what impact might reduced foreign investment have on the regional stability? I'm talking about the way this war might have impact on what we call foreign investment. West Africa, to a large extent, depends on foreign investment. Do you think this could affect a foreign investment in any way?
Well, I highly doubt it. And this is when I'm going to talk a little bit about the diplomatic implication of this conflict on West Africa. Now, when we look at the West African states, we have a tradition of what we call non-interference or positive neutrality. So this is when we don't necessarily take sides in any huge global event, not because we don't want to, but because if we believe that taking sides will be detrimental to our national interest or regional security objectives. So in this particular regard, yes, there's a bit of divisive politics that we have seen in the subcontinent. We have the AES states who have made it very, very clear that they are against anti-imperialism, something that Iran also advocates or leverages based on its resistance towards Western interference in its sovereign decision. So yes, we have the AES states not necessarily coming out to condemn the conflict or take sides of Iran or the United States of Israel, but still reiterating or reinforcing that issue of anti-imperialism. And then you have countries like Nigeria and Ghana, who are actually taking a much more multilateral or collective security stand. And they are calling for dialogue. They are calling for a peaceful form of resolving the conflict. They're also calling for mediation as well. But then again, when you also reflect on the alliances and the treaties and the relationships that we have in West Africa, you see that West African states belong to several blocks: OIC, OPEC, BRICS in terms of observer status or partner status, and the United Nations as well as having bilateral treaties with critical actors in this conflict, be it Russia, be it China, be it the United States, be it Israel, be it the UK. And these are all important conversations. So we have all these very important treaties. We have existing agreements, whether it's defense, whether it's security, whether it's trade. So I do not think that this conflict to a certain degree would impact on the foreign direct investments. I highly doubt it. In fact, if there is also, if West Africa would have to take a stand as a bloc, or even individual countries like Nigeria or Ghana should take a stand, they most likely might lean towards actors who they have much more relationship with in terms of treaties. And I'm talking about the United States, I'm talking about Israel, I'm talking about global North countries. Recently, there's the controversial health treaty that was signed not just by Nigeria alone, but also by Burkina Faso as well. So there is a lot on the line, and they most likely might not in any way take that stand. But again, we also have to also reflect in terms of diplomatic implication. We also have to think about that very critical aspect of the US intention in Iran in terms of regime change. It raised the question of what if superpowers have identified certain states in West Africa or certain governments as undemocratic or as a threat to international security? Would they go in like what they did in Venezuela and what they are doing currently in Iran? This is something that West African states are beginning to think about and reflect on. And what happened to the spirit of multilateralism and collective security, whereby we look for non-violent means of resolving our conflict or disagreements? And these are critical questions that we have to reflect on. The idea that a superpower can take a unilateral decision and use force or might over dialogue is not something that West African states are very comfortable with. Granted, we are towing the line of mediation and dialogue, but we are also watching. But then again, we have multiple numbers of actors that we can work with. Now, regarding Iran, among the GCC countries, West African states are very, very much aware that they have other options apart from Iran to trade with. They have Kuwait, they have Qatar, they have Saudi Arabia. So the options are there. So they might not necessarily take the stance of Iran, but they are very, very much aware of the implication of international law being violated, the implication of unilateral decisions taken by powerful countries to change the narrative or to capture certain economic or state resources or to influence decisions being made in that country in line with their national interest or foreign policies.
Thank you very much. Now, while you were speaking, you talked about, well, there are some things that the West African government needs to take away, the West African state needs to take away from the fight. Let's talk about border security. Don't you think that ECOWAS is supposed to do everything possible to protect its border security, looking at what is happening right now at the Middle East generally? And, you know, some parts of West Africa, we've had a lot of security situations, Nigeria inclusive. So what do you think of protecting or taking very seriously our border security?
Okay, so in terms of border security, I think the conversation goes beyond border security in terms of what ECOWAS can do. There is no direct threat per se in terms of border insecurity, you know, in the context of this conflict with Iran. The distance, the geographical location is quite far, and to the best of our knowledge, Iran is not yet looking at attacking Western interests within the West African subcontinent. But it doesn't mean that, yes, we cannot pay attention to border security because of the multiple active non-state armed actors that we do have within our subcontinent. But I think that what ECOWAS should focus on, and the individual states or member state ECOWAS, is to look at how they can leverage and how they can exploit whatever opportunities that we can gain from this particular conflict. When we reflect on previous conflicts, Russia, Ukraine, and what that could have meant for countries like Nigeria, for instance, in terms of supplying natural gas, already refined or produced gas to Europe, you know, these are critical issues that we could have exploited and leveraged on. We could have improved our oil and gas sector in terms of revenues gained from that particular sector. In terms of supply chains and shipping routes, in terms of building strong infrastructure that is ready to take advantage. I mean, I dare use that word. It's not a very fair word to use when you're thinking about people suffering from the conflict. But that is the thing about war. There are always those that will benefit from this conflict. So these are the kind of things that ECOWAS should be thinking about. And ECOWAS should also be thinking about the implication of not being part of the decision-making process. At the early days of this war, we had this very important meeting at the United Nations Security Council level, and no African state was represented in that meeting. That meeting was about discussing how best to handle or contain, or at best, how best to resolve the conflict in Iran. And no African state was part of that decision. And that is quite glaring because we are vulnerable to some of the implications or the fallout or the ripple effect of that conflict in Iran. Economic and energy security being at the very high point of that vulnerability. So ECOWAS should actually be asking itself this question: what exactly is our position at the international community? What value can we add? What voice can we lend to this conversation? Who should be our potential allies, and what stand can we take if we have to take a stand when we are having this conversation regarding the conflict and the sides to take? Because we do have major actors involved. We have the US, which is still the superpower. Some would say it's a declining superpower, but it is still the superpower that we have on planet Earth. We also have Israel as well, which has this superpower as its own ally. And of course, these two powers involved in this conflict also have their own allies as well. So these are geopolitical codes that we need to calculate at the ECOWAS level, at the regional level. I've always advocated a collective voice, one voice with for African interaction with the international community. So we need to not have these divisive voices within the subcontinent when we are talking about the AES states and their blatant disregard for Western interaction with global South country. Yes, I am not against. I mean, I am very, very much I'm very much a proponent of anti-imperialism. I do not believe in imperialism. But at the same time, I'm also aware of international relations and the importance of interacting and the interdependence that we have with other countries across the globe. So these are the reflections that I expect ECOWAS heads of states and members of West Africa to start reflecting on.
We are trying to round up as a matter of fact. But then, before I let you go, let's talk about alliances in West Africa. You talked about a united voice. You just recently, not too long ago, we saw some countries breaking out of ECOWAS, probably because they were aggrieved of one or two things. Now, what is your assessment of regional alliance in West Africa?
Okay, well, regional alliance in West Africa is very important because, I mean, when you look at the West African subcontinent, we are dealing with a lot of issues, ranging from terrorism, violent extremism, climate change, human capital development, food insecurity. It's a whole lot of issues, and states on their own, individually, by virtue of the limited capacity and resources that they have, are unable to deal with these threats on their own. And so that is why we need a collective response to these threats. Granted, the AES state has pulled out of ECOWAS, largely due to its decision to adopt a military system of government, as well as ECOWAS response to that, and as well as the AES reinforce advocacy for anti-imperialism and its perception that the other members of ECOWAS are tilting much more Western or still open to exploitation by Western countries. So these are important issues. We cannot disregard these issues. But at the same time, two alliances are very, very important. Within the subcontinent, it's very important for African states to have a united voice. Now, whether the AES choose to come back to ECOWAS or not, I mean, that is a different conversation. But the AES bloc can work with the ECOWAS bloc to deal with certain critical security issues. Although we have a lot of bilateral agreements between the West African
our time
countries.
is up. I wish we could continue, but our time is up. Like I was telling our audience, that, well, conversations with you is so interesting, but then we'll try as much as possible to have you talk about other diplomatic issues again. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Ebimbore Sefa, HOD International Relations and Diplomacy, Base University. Thank you very much for joining us on Diplomatic Perspective today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, everyone, this is the size of Diplomatic Perspective today. I want to say a very big thank you for joining us. My name is Ramsey Enoch Agbo. Bye-bye for now.
The world is fast changing and news breaks at lightning speed. Let us guide you through events and stories about global narratives and developments in geopolitics, diplomacy, foreign affairs, and world economy. Get factual and multi-angle perspectives on stories around the globe. Global Television brings you Diplomatic Perspective every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. with Ramsey Enoch Agbo. Diplomatic Perspective, the world in front of you.